The transport ship shook hard. Lily Warren grabbed the metal bar next to her seat and held on tight. She was 16 years old, and this was her first trip into deep space. Now it seemed like it might be her last. Red lights flashed all around the cabin. A loud alarm filled the air. People were screaming and running. Lily could see her father across the room, trying to reach her, but the ship tilted and he fell against the wall. All passengers to escape pods, the ship's computer announced. Hull breach in sectors 7 through 12. Repeat, all passengers to escape pods. Lily's mother had been in Sector 9 when the explosion happened. Lily did not want to think about that. She could not think about that right now. She had to survive. The Galactic Coalition had invited humans to take a trial. If humans passed the trial, they would be allowed to join hundreds of other alien species in a great union that stretched across the galaxy. The trial was simple but hard. Human representatives would be placed on a moon with no help and no technology. They had to prove they could survive for 90 days. Lily was not supposed to be part of the trial. She was just a passenger on the transport ship. Her parents were scientists who were going to study the trial from a safe distance. But now the ship was breaking apart, and nothing was going the way it was supposed to go. Someone pushed Lily toward an escape pod. She fell inside, and the door closed behind her. Through the small window, she saw her father's face for just one moment. He was shouting something, but she could not hear him. Then the pod launched, and she was flying through space alone. The pod shook and spun. Lily felt sick. She closed her eyes and held on to the safety straps. The pod's computer was making strange noises. Warning messages appeared on the small screen, but they were in alien languages she did not understand. Then everything went black. When Lily woke up, she was lying on hard ground. The pod had crashed. Part of the roof was gone, and she could see a gray sky above her. Rain was falling, but it was not like any rain she had ever seen. It was yellow, and it smelled bad. Where it touched the rocks around her, it made a hissing sound. Lily got up slowly. Her body hurt everywhere, but nothing seemed to be broken. Her emergency suit was torn in several places, and she knew that was very bad. The suit was supposed to protect her from dangerous environments. Now it could not protect her from anything. She looked around. The landscape was ugly and harsh. Sharp rocks pointed up from the ground like broken teeth. There were no trees, no grass, no signs of life. Just gray rock and yellow rain and a sky that looked sick. Her communicator made a crackling sound. Then a voice came through, broken and hard to hear. Lily, this is Commander Price. Can you hear me? She pressed the button to respond. Yes, I can hear you. Where am I? What happened? The commander's voice came through again, clearer this time. Your pod went off course. You landed in the trial zone. The actual trial zone, Lily. The area where humans are supposed to prove we can survive. Lily felt her heart beat faster. But I am not a trial participant. I am just a kid. They have to come get me. There was a long pause. Then Commander Price spoke again, and his voice was sad. The Coalition observers have already registered your crash. They say you are now an official trial participant. They will not allow any rescue until the trial period is over. But that is 90 days, Lily said. Her voice was shaking. I cannot survive here for 90 days. I do not have any supplies. I do not have shelter. I do not have anything. I know, the commander said. I am so sorry, Lily. We are trying to argue with them, but they will not change their minds. They say the trial is about survival without help. If we rescue you, humanity fails the trial. All of humanity. Lily sat down on a rock. The yellow rain was still falling, and she could feel it burning her skin slightly where her suit was torn. She looked at the wreckage of her escape pod. Pieces of metal and wire and broken machinery were scattered across the ground. "The Coalition wants to see if humans can survive," she said quietly, more to herself than to the commander. "They want to see if we are worth joining their group." "That is correct," the commander said. Lily stood up again. She looked at the broken pod. She looked at the harsh landscape. She thought about her father's face in that last moment before her pod launched. He had looked scared, but he had also looked like he believed in her. "Okay," she said. "Then I will show them. Lily, you do not have to be brave. This situation is not fair. You are just a child, and this is not your responsibility." "Maybe not," Lily said. "But I am here now. And my parents taught me that when you face a problem, you do not cry about it. You fix it." She walked over to the largest piece of wreckage. It was part of the pod's heat shield, designed to protect the pod when it entered an atmosphere. The material was dark and strong. The yellow rain hit it and slid off without causing any damage. Lily smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real. "Commander, I need you to do something for me," she said. "Anything." "What do you need?" "I need you to tell me everything you know about this moon. The weather patterns, the temperature changes, everything. And then I need you to stop talking to me like I'm going to die. Because I am not going to die. I am going to build a shelter, and I am going to survive this trial. And when it is over, I'm going to walk out of here and tell those alien observers exactly what humans are made of." Commander Price was quiet for a moment. Then he laughed. It was a surprise laugh, like he had not expected to feel any happiness on this terrible day. "You know what, Lily? I believe you. I really do." Somewhere far away, in a ship floating above the moon, the alien observers were watching. Coordinator Thiessen, a being made of living crystal, looked at the screens showing the human girl standing in the rain, sorting through wreckage with her bare hands. "This is interesting," Thiessen said to the other observers. "Most species panic when they crash alone. They run or they hide or they give up. This human child is doing none of those things. She will die within 3 rotations, the Morthax observer said. The Morthax were insect-like beings with hard shells and cold logic. Humans have no natural protection, no armor, no venom, no special abilities. She is soft and weak and alone." "Perhaps," Thiessen said. "But look at her eyes. Look at the way she moves. She is not acting like prey. She is acting like a predator. A predator of what? There is nothing to hunt on that moon." Thiessen made a sound that meant thinking in their language. "Maybe she is not hunting for food. Maybe she is hunting for something else. For survival itself." The Morthax observer made a dismissive gesture. "Foolish talk. Survival is not something you hunt. It is something that happens or does not happen based on your biological advantages. And humans have none." Down on the moon's surface, Lily dragged the heat shield piece toward a natural dip in the rock. The rain was getting stronger, and she needed to find protection fast. Her suit was failing. Her skin was starting to burn. But she did not stop. She thought about her mother, who had taught her about materials and how they react under different conditions. She thought about her father, who had shown her how to look at broken things and see what they could become instead of what they used to be. "I am not going to die here," she said out loud. "To no one and everyone at the same time. I am going to build something. And it is going to be amazing." The first night was coming. The yellow rain was getting worse. And somewhere in the galaxy, the future of humanity depended on a 16-year-old girl with nothing but scrap metal and determination. Lily Warren got to work. The first night was the hardest thing Lily had ever done in her life. She had managed to drag 3 large pieces of heat shield to the rocky dip before the sky turned dark. The pieces leaned against each other like a tent, creating a small, dry space underneath. It was not much, but it kept the yellow rain off her body. Lily sat in the darkness and listened to the rain hitting her makeshift roof. The sound was like cooking fat in a hot pan, sizzling and angry. She could smell the acid in the air, sharp and chemical. Her torn suit was doing almost nothing now, and her exposed skin felt raw and sore. She did not sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her mother's face. She saw the explosion. She heard the screaming. So she kept her eyes open, and she thought about the morning instead, when the gray light finally came through the gaps. In her shelter, Lily crawled outside and looked at the world around her. The rain had stopped, at least for now. The landscape was still ugly and harsh, but in the daylight she could see more details. The rocks had veins of shiny metal running through them. The ground was covered in a thin layer of gray dust. And in the distance, she could see something that looked like steam rising from cracks in the earth. "Commander Price, are you there?" she said into her communicator. "I am here, Lily. I did not sleep either. How are you doing?" "I am alive." "That is something." She paused to look around more carefully. "There is metal in these rocks. Shiny stuff. Do you know what it is?" There was a sound of typing on the other end. "Let me check the survey data." "Yes, the moon has deposits of something called metallite. It is a conductive ore. Very useful for electronics and energy systems. Can I melt it? Shape it into things? Possibly, if you had enough heat. But your pod's power cells are probably damaged. They might not produce enough energy for metalwork." Lily walked over to her crash pod and started digging through the wreckage. Most of the electronics were broken beyond repair. But she found something interesting in the back section. 3 small fuel cells, still glowing faintly with stored power. "I found some fuel cells," she reported. "They are small, but they are working. Be very careful with those. They are your only power source. If you use them up too fast, you will have nothing left for emergencies." "I understand." Lily set the fuel cells aside carefully. "What else do I need to know about this place?" "You said you would tell me everything." Commander Price spent the next hour giving her information. The moon had a rotation cycle of about 20 hours. The acid rain came mostly during the dark period, though there were sometimes storms during daylight too. The temperature dropped sharply at night, sometimes below freezing. There was no surface water, but there might be underground sources. Lily listened to everything and tried to remember it all. She did not have anything to write with, so she repeated the important facts to herself over and over until they stuck in her memory. After the commander finished talking, Lily started exploring the area around her crash site. She moved slowly and carefully, testing the ground with each step. In some places, the rock was solid and stable. In other places, it crumbled under her weight. She found the steam vents after about an hour of walking. They were cracks in the ground where hot gas escaped from somewhere deep below. The gas smelled bad, like rotten eggs, but it was warm. Very warm. Lily stood next to one of the vents and let the heat wash over her. For the first time since the crash, she felt something other than cold and pain. She felt hope. "I can use this," she said out loud. "I can channel this heat somehow. Use it to stay warm at night." She looked around and started planning. The steam vents were about 200 meters from her current shelter. That was too far to be useful. But maybe she could build a new shelter closer to the vents. Or maybe she could find a way to direct the heat toward her existing shelter. The day passed quickly as Lily worked. She sorted through all the wreckage from her pod, making piles of different materials. Metal pieces in one pile, wire and cable in another pile, fabric and soft materials in a third pile. Anything that might be useful got saved. Anything that was truly broken got pushed aside. The alien observers continued to watch her through their sensors. She's organizing the debris, Thiessen noted. Creating categories. This is unusual behavior for a survival situation. It is a waste of time, the Morithax observer said. She should be finding food and water, not playing with garbage. Perhaps. But notice how she moves. Every action has a purpose. She's not panicking or making random decisions. She is following some kind of plan. What plan could she possibly have? She is a child with no training and no resources. Thiessen did not answer, but they continued to watch with growing interest. On the moon's surface, Lily had finished her sorting. She had more materials than she expected. The escape pod had been full of equipment before the crash, and not all of it was destroyed. She had pieces of heat-resistant ceramic, lengths of flexible tubing, sheets of thin metal, bundles of wire, and several tools that still worked. The most important discovery was a small cutting device powered by one of the fuel cells. It could slice through metal like a hot knife through butter. With this tool, she could shape the wreckage into whatever she needed. I am going to need a lot more shelter, she said to herself. Something bigger, something stronger, something that can keep out the rain and hold in the heat. She looked at the rocks around her. Some of them were large enough to use as walls if she could move them. Others were too heavy for her to lift alone. Then she remembered something her father had told her years ago. You do not always need to be strong. Sometimes you just need to be smart about how you use the strength you have. Lily found a long piece of metal from the pod's frame. She wedged one end under a large rock and pushed down on the other end. The rock moved. Not much, but it moved. Lever, she said, smiling. Simple machines. Physics. I can do this. By the end of the second day, Lily had moved 4 large rocks into position around her original shelter. They formed the beginning of a wall, something to block the wind and support a larger roof structure. Her arms ached and her hands were blistered, but she felt proud of what she had done. Commander Price called again as darkness began to fall. Lily, we have been watching your progress from up here. Some of us are very impressed. Some of you? Lily asked. What about the others? The others are worried. They think you are pushing yourself too hard. They think you should conserve your energy and wait for rescue. But there is no rescue coming. You told me that yourself. I know. That is why I am on your side. The commander paused. Lily, the coalition observers have been discussing you. Thiessen, the crystal being who runs the observation team, has taken a special interest in your case. Is that good or bad? I am not sure. But Thiessen has convinced the other observers to record everything you do in detail. They want to study your behavior. Learn from it. Lily laughed, even though nothing was really funny. Great. I am a science experiment now. You are more than that. You are showing them something they have never seen before. A human child, alone and without help, refusing to give up. Some of the alien species in the coalition have never encountered anything like it. The yellow rain began to fall again, and Lily retreated to her shelter. It was still small and uncomfortable, but it felt a little bit more like home than it had the night before. She had walls now, or at least the beginning of walls. She had a plan. She had hope. Commander, she said as she settled in for her second night, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you think my parents are still alive? My father, at least? He was still on the ship when I launched. There was a long silence. Then the commander spoke, and his voice was gentle. I do not know, Lily. The ship was badly damaged. Some sections survived. Some did not. We are still searching for survivors. Will you tell me when you find out? Even if the news is bad? I will tell you. I promise. Lily closed her eyes. The rain hissed against her shelter roof. The wind howled through the gaps in her rock walls. But she was alive. She was surviving. And tomorrow, she would build more. "Good night, Commander," she said. "Good night, Lily. Stay strong." She did not answer. She was already thinking about the morning, planning her next moves, designing her next constructions. The girl who had crashed on this moon as a passenger was gone now. In her place was something new, something harder and stronger and more determined than anyone had expected. The trial had removed shelter first, and Lily Warren was building it back. 15 days had passed since Lily crashed on the moon. In that time, she had changed everything. The small lean-to shelter was gone. In its place stood something that looked almost like a real building. Walls made of stacked rock and bent metal rose up from the ground. A roof of overlapping heat shield pieces covered the top, angled so the acid rain would slide off and collect in channels she had carved along the sides. Inside, the space was dry and warm, heated by a system of tubes that carried hot air from the steam vents 200 meters away. Lily stood outside her creation and looked at it with tired but proud eyes. Her hands were covered in cuts and calluses. Her face was thin from not eating enough. But she was alive, and she had built something amazing. "Lily, this is incredible," Commander Price said through the communicator. "When did you sleep? When did you rest?" "I slept a little," she said. "Not much. There was too much work to do." The truth was that she had slept very little in the past 2 weeks. Every hour felt precious. Every moment was an opportunity to make her shelter stronger, safer, better. She would work until she could not keep her eyes open, then sleep for a few hours, then wake up and work again. The heating system had been the hardest part. The steam vents produced plenty of heat, but the gas they released was poisonous. Lily needed a way to capture the heat without letting the bad air into her shelter. She solved the problem with a heat exchanger. She built a box out of metal plates and placed it over one of the smaller steam vents. Cold air from outside passed through tubes inside the box, getting warmed by the hot gas without mixing with it. The warmed air then traveled through more tubes to her shelter, rising up through vents in the floor. It was not a perfect system. Sometimes the tubes got blocked. Sometimes the heat was not enough. But it worked, and that was what mattered. "The Coalition observers are having a very interesting debate about you," Commander Price told her. "Thiessen has been explaining human engineering to the other species. Many of them do not understand how you are doing what you are doing. What is there to understand? I am just building things. That is exactly what they do not understand. Most species in the Coalition have specialists. Engineers who spend their entire lives learning one thing. Builders who only know how to build. Designers who only know how to design. But you are doing everything. Engineering, construction, problem solving, resource management. All at the same time." Lily thought about this as she walked around her shelter, checking for problems. She found a small crack in one of the walls and marked it with a piece of wire so she would remember to fix it later. "Humans are like that, I guess," she said. "We learn a lot of different things. We have to, because we never know what we might need." The Morathax observer thinks this makes humans weak. They believe specialization is the path to strength. If you try to do everything, you will not be good at anything. And what do you think? Commander Price was quiet for a moment. "I think the Morathax have never seen a 16-year-old human girl build a heated shelter on an alien moon using nothing but crashed debris and determination. I think they are about to learn something important about our species." Lily smiled. It was one of the few times she had smiled since the crash. The next challenge was food. Lily had found some emergency rations in the pod wreckage, but they were running low. She needed another source of nutrition, or she would starve before the 90 days were over. She started exploring farther from her shelter, looking for anything that might be edible. The moon seemed dead at first. But as she looked more carefully, she began to notice signs of life. Small creatures that burrowed into the rock. Patches of gray-green moss growing in shadowy places. Tiny insects that crawled out after the rain stopped. The moss interested her most. It grew in thick mats in places where the acid rain could not reach directly. When she touched it, it felt damp and cool. When she smelled it, it reminded her of seaweed. "Commander, I found some kind of plant life. A moss or something similar. Can you analyze it remotely? Tell me if it is safe to eat. Send me a visual and I will check our database." Lily held up a piece of the moss to her communicator's camera. There was a long pause as Commander Price checked the information. The database says it is probably safe for human consumption. The chemical composition is similar to some earth algae, high in protein and minerals. But Lily, please be careful. Eat only a small amount first and wait to see if you have any bad reactions. Lily ate a tiny piece of the moss. It tasted terrible, like dirt mixed with salt. But it did not make her sick. She waited several hours, monitoring herself for any problems. When nothing bad happened, she ate a little more. The moss would not be enough to keep her fully fed, but it was something. Combined with her remaining rations, it might be enough to survive. Dachi started gathering the moss and storing it in a dry area of her shelter. Then she had another idea. What if she could grow the moss herself? What if she could create a garden inside her shelter where the conditions were controlled and safe? Lily set aside a corner of her building and filled it with rocks that had moss growing on them. She added water that she had collected and filtered from the acid rain. She made sure the temperature stayed cool and steady. The first week of her garden experiment was disappointing. Most of the moss died. The conditions were not quite right. But Lily watched and learned and adjusted. She changed the amount of water. She changed the temperature. She changed the type of rock she used as a base dot. By day 20, she had her first success. A small patch of new moss was growing on one of her rocks. It was tiny and fragile, but it was proof that her idea could work. "You are farming now," Commander Price said when she told him the news. "On a moon that was supposed to be impossible to survive on, you are growing food." "It is not much," Lily said. "Just a little bit of moss." "It is not just a little bit of moss. It is hope. It is proof that humans can adapt to anything." The alien observers were watching this development with growing amazement. Thiessen called a special meeting to discuss what they had seen. "The human child has done something unprecedented," Thiessen announced to the council. "She has not simply survived in a hostile environment. She has begun to cultivate it. She is changing the moon to suit her needs instead of accepting the moon as it is. This is dangerous thinking," the Morithax observer argued. "Species that change their environments often destroy them. Look at the history of the Valaxian Empire. They terraformed every world they touched and destroyed their own ecosystem in the process. The human is not terraforming. She's working with what exists, finding ways to use the resources that are already present. This is different. Different how?" Thiessen thought for a moment before answering. The Valaxians saw hostile worlds as problems to be eliminated. This human sees her hostile world as a puzzle to be solved. She's not trying to destroy what is here. She is trying to understand it and work with it. The debate continued for hours. Some observers believed Lily represented the best of what the coalition was looking for in new member species. Others worried that human adaptability might be too aggressive, too ambitious. Meanwhile, on the moon's surface, Lily kept working. She did not know about the debates happening above her. She did not care about coalition politics or alien opinions. She cared about one thing only: staying alive long enough to walk out of this trial on her own 2 feet. Day 25 brought new problems. One of her fuel cells failed completely. Another was down to 10% power. She had been using the cutting tool too much, burning through her energy reserves faster than she expected. I need to find another power source, she told Commander Price, or I need to stop using the tools and find another way to work. What are you thinking? Lily looked at the steam vents in the distance. Heat is energy, right? That is what they taught us in school. There must be some way to turn that heat into electricity. Theoretically, yes, with the right equipment. But you do not have that equipment. Maybe I can make it. Lily spent the next 3 days studying everything she knew about electricity and heat. She remembered lessons from school, things her parents had taught her, information she had read in books. Slowly, an idea began to form in her mind. She could not build a proper power generator. She did not have the materials or the knowledge. But maybe she could build something simpler. Something that would produce a tiny amount of electricity, just enough to charge her remaining fuel cell a little bit at a time. Her solution was ugly and inefficient, but it worked. She created a simple thermoelectric device using 2 different metals from the pod wreckage, connected by wire and exposed to the temperature difference between the hot steam vents and the cold outside air. The electricity it produced was barely enough to power a small light. But when she connected it to her dying fuel cell, the power level slowly began to rise. You built a generator, Commander Price said, his voice filled with disbelief. Out of scrap metal and wire. You actually built a generator. Lily looked at her creation. It was a mess of twisted metal and tangled cables. It hummed and sparked and looked like it might fall apart at any moment. But it worked. I guess I did, she said. I guess humans can build anything. Above the moon, Thason made a note in the official observation record. Day 42 began like any other day on the moon. Lily woke up in her shelter, ate a small portion of moss mixed with the last of her rations, and started planning her work for the day. She had become used to the routine. Wake up, eat, work, sleep, repeat. But this day would not be like the others. Commander Price's voice crackled through her communicator with unusual urgency. Lily, we have a problem. A big problem. Our sensors are detecting a massive storm system forming over your region. This is not a normal acid rain event. This is something much worse. Lily walked outside and looked at the sky. It was darker than usual, and the clouds seemed to move faster than she had ever seen before. A cold wind was blowing, getting stronger by the minute. How bad is it going to be? She asked. The coalition weather models predict winds of over 200 kilometers per hour. The acid rain will be horizontal instead of falling down, and the storm will last at least 36 hours, maybe longer. Lily felt her heart beat faster. Her shelter was strong, but was it strong enough for this? She had built it to handle normal weather, not a superstorm. How long do I have before it hits? 12 hours. Maybe less. 12 hours. That was not much time, but it was something. Lily got to work immediately. She started reinforcing her walls, adding extra rocks to the weak points and using wire to tie everything together more tightly. She checked her roof and found 3 places where the gaps were too big. She filled them with metal plates and sealed the edges with strips of fabric soaked in rock dust. As she worked, she kept thinking about what might go wrong. What if the walls collapsed? What if the roof blew away? What if her heating system failed and she froze to death in the cold? She needed a backup plan. She needed somewhere else to go if her main shelter failed. Lily looked around the landscape and spotted a natural depression in the rock about 300 meters away. It was in a more protected location, surrounded by large boulders that would block some of the wind. If she could build a small shelter there, it might survive even if her main shelter did not. She made a decision. Instead of spending all her time reinforcing her main shelter, she would split her effort. Sometime on the main shelter, sometime on a backup. The backup shelter was simpler than her main building. Just a few pieces of heat shield wedged between rocks, creating a small protected space. No heating system. No water collection. Just a place to survive if everything else failed. But Lily did something extra. As she built the backup shelter, she started thinking about other people who might come after her. What if another human crashed here someday? What if they did not know how to survive like she had learned? She found a flat piece of metal from her pod wreckage. Using a sharp rock, she scratched words into the surface. She wrote down everything she had learned about surviving on this moon. Where to find water, how to build a heat exchanger, which moss was safe to eat, how to make a simple generator. The writing was rough and hard to read, but it was there. A message for the future. What are you doing? Commander Price asked when he saw what she was working on. Writing instructions, Lily said. In case someone else ends up here someday. I do not want them to have to figure everything out from the beginning like I did. Lily, you are in the middle of preparing for a deadly storm. You might not survive the next 2 days. And you are spending time writing a survival guide for people who might never exist? Yes. Why? Lily stopped working and thought about the question. Because that is what humans do. We do not just survive for ourselves. We survive so we can help others survive after us. Every generation builds on what the generation before them learned. That is how we got to the stars in the first place. Commander Price was quiet for a long moment. You know, Lily, sometimes I forget you are only 16 years old. Then you say something like that, and I remember that you are exactly what human education and human culture produced. A girl who thinks about the future, even when her own present is uncertain. Is that a compliment? It is the biggest compliment I can give. The storm hit 6 hours earlier than expected. Lily was still putting the finishing touches on her backup shelter when the wind suddenly changed. One moment, it was strong, but manageable. The next moment, it was like standing in front of a wall of moving air. She had to grab onto a rock to keep from being blown away. The sky turned almost black. The acid rain came sideways, driven by wind so strong that it felt like being hit with tiny hammers. Lily could not see more than a few meters in any direction. She ran. Her main shelter was closer than the backup, so she headed there. The wind pushed against her, trying to knock her down. The rain burned her skin wherever it touched. She could barely breathe. The door to her shelter was harder to open than she expected. The wind pressure was holding it closed. She pulled with all her strength, her muscles screaming, her lungs burning. Finally, the door opened just enough for her to squeeze through, and then the wind slammed it shut behind her. Inside, everything was dark. The storm had knocked out her small light. But Lily did not need to see. She knew every corner of this shelter, every rock and every piece of metal. She felt her way to the safest spot, the corner where the walls were thickest, and she sat down to wait. The noise was terrible. Wind howling like 1,000 angry animals. Rain hitting the walls like a constant attack. She could feel her shelter shaking, the whole structure moving slightly with each powerful gust. Lily closed her eyes and tried to stay calm. She thought about her father. She thought about her mother. She thought about Earth and the blue sky and the smell of grass after rain. She thought about anything except the storm that was trying to tear her world apart. Hours passed. The storm did not weaken. If anything, it seemed to get stronger. Sometime during the night, Lily heard a terrible sound. A cracking, groaning noise that came from above her. She looked up into the darkness and saw nothing, but she knew what was happening. Her roof was breaking. She had seconds to decide. Stay here and hope the roof held? Or run to the backup shelter and hope she could survive the journey? The decision was made for her when a large piece of the roof suddenly tore away. Wind and rain poured through the opening, instantly soaking everything inside. The temperature dropped so fast that Lily could see her breath in the cold. She ran again. This time, the journey was even harder. The storm was at full strength now. Every step felt like a battle. The rain blinded her. The wind tried to lift her off the ground. She fell 3 times and got back up 3 times. But she had built the backup shelter in a protected location, and she had built it well. When she finally reached it, the walls were still standing. The roof was still in place. The space inside was dry and cold, but safe. Lily collapsed onto the floor and lay there, breathing hard, shaking from cold and fear and relief. She had survived. Her main shelter was damaged, maybe destroyed, but she was alive. For 36 hours, the storm raged. Lily stayed in her backup shelter, huddled against the cold, waiting for the end. She ate moss she had stored there during the construction. She exercised to keep warm. She did not sleep much because every noise made her think the shelter was about to collapse. When the storm finally passed, she crawled outside and looked at the damage. Her main shelter was still standing. The roof was badly damaged, with 2 large pieces missing. One wall had partially collapsed. The heating system was broken, with tubes scattered across the landscape. But the basic structure had survived. More importantly, her backup shelter was completely undamaged. The protected location she had chosen had worked perfectly. "Lily, are you there? Are you alive?" Commander Price's voice came through her communicator, filled with worry. "I am here," she said. "I am alive. We lost contact during the storm. We have been trying to reach you for hours. The sensors showed your main shelter taking damage, and we thought we had lost you. You almost did. But I built a backup, just in case." Commander Price laughed, a sound of pure relief. "Of course you did. Of course you built a backup." Up in the observation ship, Thiessen reviewed the footage from the storm. They watched Lily running through impossible conditions. They watched her reach the backup shelter just in time. And they watched something else, something that the other observers had missed, the survival guide. The metal sheet with scratched instructions. It was still in the backup shelter, undamaged and readable. "She thought she might die," Thiessen said to the assembled council. "She knew the storm might kill her. And instead of focusing only on her own survival, she spent precious time creating something that would help others. Even at the end, she was thinking about the future." The Morithax observer had no response. Neither did anyone else. The human girl had done something that went beyond survival. She had proven something about her species that the Coalition had never seen so clearly before. Humans did not just fight to live. They fought to leave something behind, and that, more than any shelter or garden or generator, was what made them special. Day 90 arrived quietly. There was no fanfare, no celebration, no special signs in the sky. Just another gray morning on a harsh moon, with a girl waking up in a shelter she had built with her own hands. Lily. Warren opened her eyes and looked at the ceiling above her. It had taken her 3 weeks to repair the storm damage to her main shelter. The new roof was actually better than the old one, stronger and more waterproof. The heating system had been rebuilt with improvements based on everything she had learned. Her moss garden had not only survived but expanded to cover an entire corner of the building. She had made it. 90 days on a moon that was supposed to be impossible to survive. And she had not just survived. She had thrived. "Lily, this is Commander Price. The trial period is officially over. A rescue shuttle is on its way to your location. How are you feeling?" Lily sat up and stretched her aching muscles. She felt tired but proud, hungry but satisfied, alone but somehow connected to everyone who had been watching her struggle. I feel good, Commander. I feel really good. You should. What you did. There are no words for it. The entire human delegation has been following your progress. When you survived the storm, people cried. Grown adults crying because a 16-year-old girl built a backup shelter. I just did what needed to be done. No, Lily, you did more than that. Much more. The Coalition Council had already gathered by the time the rescue shuttle reached Lily's location. Over 200 species were represented, each one sending their observations and votes through the Galactic Communication Network. This was the moment humanity had been waiting for since first contact. The verdict on their membership application. Thiessen, the crystal observer who had watched Lily more closely than anyone, was chosen to present the official report. The trial was designed to test survival capability, Thiessen began. Specifically, we remove shelter first because shelter represents the most basic need for any species in a hostile environment. Without protection from the elements, most beings either die or focus completely on their own immediate survival. The council listened in silence as Thiessen continued. The human child, named Lily Warren, was never supposed to be a trial participant. She was a passenger on a transport ship that suffered catastrophic failure. When she crashed alone in the trial zone, she had no special equipment, no training, and no support. By all logical projections, she should have died within the first week. The Morathax representative made a sound of agreement. Many other species nodded or signaled their similar expectations. Instead, she survived for the full 90 rotations. But survival is not what impressed this observer. Many species can survive through biological advantages. The Kessin can adapt their bodies to almost any liquid environment. The Morathax have natural armor that protects them from most physical dangers. The Velth can enter hibernation states that allow them to wait out hostile conditions. Thiessen paused and displayed images on the council screens. Pictures of Lily's shelter in various stages of construction. Diagrams of her heating system. Footage of her moss garden growing in a corner of her building. This human had none of those advantages. Her species is soft, slow, and fragile by galactic standards. They cannot fly. They cannot breathe underwater. They cannot survive extreme temperatures without assistance. And yet this child not only survived, she created. The images changed to show Lily's generator, her water filtration system, her backup shelter. She built shelter from wreckage. She grew food from alien biology. She generated power from temperature differences. She did all of this with no prior training in any of these specific skills. When I asked Commander Price how this was possible, he explained something about human education that I found remarkable. Thassan's crystal form glowed slightly brighter as they continued. Humans are taught to be generalists. From childhood, they learn a little bit of everything. Science, mathematics, art, language, history, practical skills. They learn how to learn. And this, according to the commander, is the key to human survival. They do not specialize in one area and hope they never need anything else. They prepare for any situation by being able to do many things adequately. The Morathax representative interrupted. But this is exactly what we warned about. A generalist species will never excel at anything. They will always be mediocre. That is what I believed as well, Thiessen admitted. Until I watched this child. New footage appeared on the screens. Lily during the Great Storm, running through impossible conditions. Lily writing her survival guide on a sheet of metal. Lily standing outside her completed shelter on day 89, looking at the sky with an expression that seemed almost peaceful. Humans may not excel at any single skill, but they excel at combining skills in new ways. They excel at adaptation. They excel at creativity. And perhaps most importantly, they excel at thinking beyond themselves. Thiessen displayed the survival guide that Lily had created. During the worst storm this moon had experienced in recorded history, when her own survival was uncertain, this human child spent precious time creating instructions for future visitors. She did not know if anyone would ever read her guide. She did not know if she would survive long enough to see it used. But she wrote it anyway, because she believed that helping others was worth the effort, even if she might die. The council chamber was completely silent. I have observed hundreds of trial participants over the past several centuries. I have seen species with natural advantages that should have guaranteed success. Many of them failed because they could not adapt to unexpected challenges. I have seen species with no obvious advantages who succeeded through clever use of their abilities. But I have never seen anything like this. Thiessen turned to address the full council directly. The human Lily Warren did not just prove that her species can survive. She proved that her species can improve their surroundings. She proved that they think about the future, even when the present is deadly. She proved that they help others, even when they gain nothing from it. And she proved all of this at the age of 16, without training or support. On a moon that should have killed her on the first day. The Crystal Observer made a formal gesture that signaled the end of their presentation. It is my recommendation that humanity be admitted to the Galactic Coalition immediately. Not because they are the strongest species, or the most intelligent, or the most advanced, but because they are exactly what the Coalition was created to find. A species that builds. A species that adapts. A species that cares about something bigger than itself. The vote was called. 200 species cast their decisions. Some voted quickly, their minds already made up. Others deliberated for long moments, weighing centuries of tradition against what they had witnessed over the past 90 days. When the final tally was announced, the result was unanimous. Humanity was admitted to the Galactic Coalition without a single vote against. On the moon's surface, the rescue shuttle landed near Lily's shelter. Commander Price was the first one out, running toward the girl who had changed history. Lily stood outside her shelter, watching him approach. She looked thin and tired and older than her 16 years. But she was smiling. "You did it," Commander Price said, pulling her into a hug. "You really did it." "We did it," Lily corrected. "You talked to me every day. You gave me information. You believed in me when I wanted to give up. You never wanted to give up." "Not really." Lily thought about this and nodded. "No. I guess I never did." Other humans were emerging from the shuttle now. Scientists and diplomats and journalists, all wanting to see the girl who had saved humanity's future. But Commander Price held them back for a moment longer. "Before we go, before everything gets crazy and you become the most famous person in the galaxy, is there anything you want? Anything you need?" Lily looked at her shelter. She looked at her moss garden visible through the doorway. She looked at the harsh gray landscape that had been her home for 90 days. "I want to know if my parents survived the ship crash," she said quietly. "You promised to tell me, even if the news was bad." Commander Price's face changed. Lily's heart sank. "Your mother." "I am sorry, Lily. She was in the section that was destroyed. We found her remains weeks ago. I did not want to tell you while you were still fighting to survive." Lily closed her eyes. She had known somehow. She had known since the first day. "And my father?" "He is waiting for you on the delegation ship. He was injured, but he survived. He has been watching your progress every day. He wanted to be on this rescue shuttle, but the doctors would not allow it." Lily opened her eyes. Tears were running down her face, but she was still smiling. "Then let us go see him. I have a lot to tell him about what I built." As the shuttle lifted off, Lily looked down at her shelter one last time. It looked small from up here, a tiny human creation on a vast alien moon. But it represented something huge. something that would change the galaxy's understanding of what humans could do. The trial had removed shelter first, and the human girl had crafted safety from scrap. Thought she had done it for herself. She had done it for her species, and she had done it for everyone who would come after her, leaving instructions and hope carved into metal, waiting for the next person who needed them. That the coalition would eventually learn was what humans did best.